Hello everyone. Um, I'm here to make my second video to the YouTube world. And I just want to say that this isn't easy for me. I'm really um, nervous talking about this stuff for a number of reasons. But I want it to be as open about my experience as possible. Even, the embarrassing details, just because I feel like a lot of people who grow up in this organization will be able to relate, even if they, even if they don't want to admit that. I think that a lot of people can relate. So if you're a witness watching this, you can ask yourself honestly, like I used to do. I used to ask myself honest questions a lot, just to see, how strong I was in my beliefs, and I'd beat myself up with my honest answers. You can ask yourself honestly, if you had the chance to, go out into the world and live freely, you know, without anyone having any say, without being worried, or with just basically without your family or friends knowing, if you could move, let's just ask this a little bit more simpler. If you can move to like a different city or province or state or wherever you're from, and you can move quite a distance away from your family, would you continue doing the things that you feel you're supposed to do? When I was a witness, my answer to that question was I probably would still continue to be involved with the witnesses on some level. I would go to the meetings and, I would still try because I was indoctrinated, because I believed it was true. But I craved the freedom of being able to be out of my parents' place, out of the restrictions, and if I was able to just, be free, I craved to be able to make my own choices, basically, and to have my own opinions. So, um, so ask yourself that: Would you? Would you really? You might say, yeah, of course, I believe it's the truth, but would you really do everything you're supposed to? Would you really, um, never go out with friends after work? You know, never hang out with somebody of the opposite sex alone? Would you really not do any of those things? Because I think that that's not actually. I think if you say you wouldn't, then you're not telling the truth. That's just my opinion. Um, so I just wanted to be as honest as possible so that people could see and benefit from me being honest, no matter how embarrassing it is for me to tell my stories. But I just hope that it helps people, and also people who are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. I hope that it helps you find some comfort in knowing that, you're not a bad person for leaving or for wanting to live your life. And I struggled with those thoughts for quite some time. I struggled with feeling guilty and like I was a bad person for a long time. So I want to help avoid that for other people, if they happen to come across my videos. So this is why I'm making them, even though it's really difficult to say everything that I have to say. This is the reason. All right, so I left off basically in the last video with talking about my first meeting with the elders. And after more thought, I realized that the first meeting with the elders, actually, it was just 2 elders. So what happened was, when I decided to go and talk to the elders, I contacted one of the elders that I actually really liked in my hall. He was my favorite elder. If I had to have a favorite elder, right? He was my favorite elder. And he was like, I looked at him like my dad. He was such a nice man, and he was so good to our family, and he did really wonderful things for our family, and I still think of him like he is such a nice man. So I trusted him. It was embarrassing to have to talk to him about things, but I definitely trusted him that he would be understanding, I guess. So he was the one that I called to say that I needed to meet with the elders and talk about something. And so he brought along another elder, and we met at the Kingdom Hall, and there was just the two of them. And so, like I said in my first video, the first thing I told them was about the local guy that I worked with, that I fooled around with or whatever. And they were quite happy that I put a stop to that. And then when they asked me if there was anything else, and I told them about my online boyfriend. So that's why it went into a second committee, because they asked a certain amount of questions. Now, my favorite elder, I will reiterate, the guy that I wanted to talk to about this, he was very, he didn't ask many of the questions. He was pretty much just there because they had to be two of them, right? And he listened, and but I could tell he was really uncomfortable. And the other elder that was there was asking, like, very intrusive questions about me and my online boyfriend and what we did together. So, to the point where it was like, um, was there, like, I told them we had sex, right? So, as far as I'm concerned, if you say you had sex, then there really should be no more conversation because everyone knows what that is. End of story. But that's not really the case when you're confessing in a judicial committee. They want to know how many times you had sex, which, I mean, I didn't know. It wasn't a lot of times because it was only the second time that me and him met, and he was there for like the weekend. So it wasn't like we had sex, a lot of times. But personally, I honestly didn't remember because um, I kind of tried to block it out, right? I wanted to block it out and pretend it like it didn't happen because I felt bad about it and it was hard to think about it, right? So I didn't actually remember how many times. And because I said I don't know, they obviously must have assumed that we did it a lot or something. But I said it wasn't very much. I don't remember. I blocked it out or whatever, right? Like I was uncomfortable. And then they asked, what, they asked if, you know, just, it's so awkward to even talk about if I orgasmed or climaxed. I think they use that word. I don't, anyway. So, yeah, that was very weird. So they basically knew that, yeah, we had committed porneia. So porneia is the Greek word, apparently, for the word fornication. And according to the witnesses, porneia means more than just um, penetration, sex. It means touching each other's sexual parts, um, grinding each other to climax, um, just anything to do with stuff below the waist, basically. Fondling of the breast, they don't like that, of course, but that isn't considered porneia. But they definitely discourage witnesses from doing that before marriage also. Anyway, so I had to answer all these really weird questions, and it ended up being that, they said, okay, so we're going to have a judicial committee, because I don't think it would have went into a second meeting um, had I just been confessing to me and this guy at work, because me and this guy at work didn't go very far, and I put an end to it. So they were like, oh, is that all? Right? And when it wasn't is when it ended up turning into a judicial committee. And I think what would have happened had I not mentioned anything about my online boyfriend, what would have happened was they probably would have, reduced some of my privileges. I probably wouldn't have been able to be recognized as an auxiliary pioneer, because I think at that time I was auxiliary pioneer, not regular pioneering, because I didn't have enough time to put in the 70 hours, but I did regular auxiliary, so I tried to put in the 50 hours. And I'll talk more about some pioneering stories maybe another time. But yeah, so I think that probably would have been all that would have happened. They would have taken some privileges away. I probably would have been able to comment at the meetings or whatever. It's not like women have a lot of privileges anyway. But that probably would have been what happened. And I don't think it would have involved meeting again. Possibly, maybe we would have had to meet again. Maybe you need to have 3 elders to make that kind of a decision. I'm not sure. But anyway, so he said, okay, so we're going to have to meet again with another elder and have a judicial committee about this and all that jazz. So, of course, I'm like nervous, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go through all of this again, right? And so the second meeting, I was very, very disappointed, because the elder that I wanted to be in the meeting, that I, asked and told, I told him that I wanted to talk to him and another elder, he wasn't in the second meeting. So it was the one guy that was questioning me from the first meeting, and then 2 completely different elders. And they told me that, the elder I wanted, they said he chose not to be on the committee because he felt too close to me, and like that would make his judgment a little bit off or something like that. And I was a bit hurt by that, because I was like, well, he's the one that I really trust and that I felt most comfortable with. So now, not only do I have to, explain everything again, because there's 2 elders that didn't hear any of it, I just am even feeling more uncomfortable with the whole thing, right? So I later found out that he didn't ask to be, taken off the committee. He told my parents that actually he was voted off the committee by the other elders, because they felt he shouldn't be on it. So that's the true story. But anyway, we, I was in the meeting. They started asking me all these questions again, and I had to reiterate all of the uncomfortable information. And basically, what I think, I was emotional, obviously. I felt guilty for everything that I was doing. And what it came down to was they asked me a question that I didn't really know how to answer. So the question they asked me was, if this guy, obviously they used his name, but I'm not going to use his name, if he just flew up here tomorrow and showed up at your door and said, he wants to talk to you, what would you do? Would you be able to say no? What would you do? And obviously they wanted me to say something like, oh, I would slam the door in his face and I wouldn't talk to him anymore, right? But I didn't know how to answer because obviously me and this guy were having an online relationship for the majority of the time. And we were talking from the time I was like 16 and now I was 19. So this was all basically online. There was 2 incidences where we met in person and that was it. So, you know, it whether he showed up seemed irrelevant to me, but at the same time, um, you know, they thought that maybe their question was because they were going to tell me to completely cut ties with him in the virtual world, so that if he ends up showing up tomorrow, you know, what are you going to do, you know, when he's there in person? And they didn't seem to understand that I did want to break up with him, but it wasn't like it was easy to break up with him. I obviously didn't tell the elders about the psychological manipulation that he was putting on me because I, at the time, didn't really recognize it myself. But, and I felt like it was, you know, probably wrong. Like I kind of had an inner voice that said, you know, it's not really right that every time I want to break up with him, he threatens suicide. You know, I felt like that wasn't right, but I didn't want to say that to them because I didn't want to make it appear like I was making excuses. You know, I just wanted to go in there and tell the truth, and they could see I was being honest and sincere, and they wouldn't disfellowship me. That's what I thought. So they asked me this question. I didn't know how to answer because it wasn't like I could just, I felt like I couldn't just cut ties like blatantly. And if I just, you know, changed my phone number, you know, changed all of the ways that he could contact with me, you know, shut down all my accounts or whatever, um, which was kind of impossible. I mean, there's always a way for him to get a hold of me, basically. But even if I had gone through those lengths and he did show up on my doorstep, you know, at that time, I was the kind of person that I wasn't thinking for myself. It was all about making other people happy. And I had wanted to break up with him, and I had tried to break up with him, but I felt bad about it. I didn't realize, you know, because I had no chance to learn this. You know, had I been raised in a normal house that allowed me to have innocent little boyfriends come over and we watch TV on the couch or whatever, maybe I would have learned that in every single breakup, there's somebody that's not too happy about it. But I didn't learn that. I was like wanting us to break up on mutual grounds so that I didn't break his heart. And it never worked out that way. It was like whenever I wanted to break up, it was this big ordeal. And I just stayed because I felt guilty for hurting somebody. It was all about everyone else, you know. And they didn't understand the psychological manipulation that was going on. They didn't understand because I didn't tell them that I felt partly guilty for my best friend who had killed herself. I didn't tell them that because I didn't tell anybody that, you know, only my boyfriend. I was too afraid, you know, I was so hurt. There was a lot of things I had dealt with. And basically I was going to them because I wanted help. You know, I wanted people I could talk to. I wanted people I could trust. Sorry. But they didn't ask. Going to the others, it's not like they ask you why, you know. What were you thinking when you did this? Or why did this happen? It's not about any of that. It's about what you did and that it was wrong. And there's going to be consequences. You know, I'm sorry. There's nothing else. So they asked me this question. I didn't know how to answer because I didn't want to say that, oh yeah, I would. I didn't want to lie and say I was sure that I wouldn't talk to him, because the fact of the matter is, if that happened, if he did show up to my door, the type of person I am, I probably wouldn't be able to just slam the door in his face and say, get lost. I just wasn't mean. I wasn't like that. So, and obviously they knew that he had started studying. I did say that. So, how could they expect me, you know, in my frame of mind to just say get lost and slam the door and act like a complete terrible person? But this is what they wanted me to do. So when they asked that question, I didn't know what to say. So I just said, I don't know. I said, I don't know what I would do. And that didn't satisfy them, obviously. It was right after that question that they said, okay, so we're going to deliberate and you're going to have to wait out there. So I waited outside the doors in the little waiting area of the Kingdom Hall. And I just started feeling like, oh no, like I think this is gonna go the way that I thought it wasn't gonna all this time. I didn't think I was gonna get disfellowshipped because I was being so honest, and because I had decided to go myself. I wasn't manipulated into going. And that was another thing. I told my mom I told her I was going to go to the elders about things, and told her, what had happened and I needed to go to the elders. And my mom said to me, she was like, you should just marry this guy. My parents were kind of, now I don't want to make my mom look bad. She was doing this because she knew that if I had got disfellowshipped, how bad that would be for me in terms of recovery. She knew how hard that would be. So she was like, do you love this guy? Do you love this guy? Because if you do, you should marry him, and then go to the elders if you must. And they'll probably only reprove you, because you're already married. It's not like they can kick you out at that point. She was thinking of it from a standpoint of, my daughter's going to go through something really bad, and I want to try to prevent that. And first, the only thing that could come to her mind was, I should marry this guy. So she told me, marry this guy, and then go to the elders, and at least then you won't be kicked out on your own. And she's like, a lot of witnesses do that. Lots of the elders' kids do that. They go and get married to their worldly boyfriends, and then nothing happens to them. It's true, it happens. Like, I've seen it. But I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to be someone who was so cowardly that they were so scared of facing up to what they did that they just went and married somebody so they didn't have to. I felt like that was really cowardly, and I didn't want to be that person. And I also knew that I didn't really want to marry this guy. So I didn't do that. I told her, I don't think I can marry this guy. I think I just need to go and confess and set things straight. Ooh, my phone. It's for work. I have to check this. Okay, well, I'm not going to answer right now because obviously I can't, remake this video. Hopefully they leave a message. Anyway, so I chose to go to the elders instead, right? So nobody forced me. In fact, my mom was telling me I shouldn't, and yes, my boyfriend said, yeah, go to the elders if you want to prove your story. But it was only because I suggested it. I was the one who said, maybe, my life is so screwed up because I'm the one at fault and I should go to the elders and fix things. This was all my own doing. So I thought, hey, they can't disfellowship me. I went to them of my own initiative. I told them the truth about everything. You know, I felt like I was just going to finally get help and get people to help, to understand, you know. I felt like maybe they'd understand. You know, they were young once too, right? But I didn't get understanding. So I was kicked out of the room, they were deliberating, and I was feeling like, oh no, I feel like this is going to go where I don't want it to go. And I got called back in the room after, it wasn't, I don't think it was that long. I don't really remember. And the elder that was pretty much the head honcho of the Judicial Committee, the guy that was also asking me all the questions in the other meeting, he said, so we've come to a decision that we have to remove you from the congregation. And I wanted to make sure I understood him because I'm hard of hearing. So I said, do you mean, I said, so did you say remove or reprove? Because sometimes a witness could just get reproved, right? Which is like the minuscule thing. At times they'll announce it from the platform, and at times they won't, but you just lose your privileges of commenting and being a pioneer, or if you're a guy, you can't read from the platform or give talks and stuff like that. So I was hoping that that would be all that would happen, but they said, we have to remove you. And I said, remove or reprove? And they said, and he said, again, very certain, remove you. And I said, and I started kind of crying, and I was like, disfellowship me? And he said, yes, remove you. And that was really hard to hear, and I started crying. And so then he started going on with whatever he went on about, whatever they say after they make the decision to disfellowship you about, you know, you can appeal this decision, and to do that you have to do it within however long, I think it's 7 days or 10 days or something. I think 7 days, and then you have to meet with 3 new elders with the other elders present and tell your whole story again and blah blah blah. So it's not like appealing the decision is an easy process either. So they said, you know, if you feel we've made a mistake, you can appeal the decision, and then they said that this is going to give you time to get your relationship back with Jehovah. You know, you're going to just be alone and separate from everybody, and it'll just be you and Jehovah. So that's what they said to me, which which I tried to understand. I really did, you know. I wasn't angry. I was surprised. I was shocked because I didn't think that that was going to happen. But I wasn't like angry and resentful and how could you make this decision? I was just I was trying to see it from their perspective as best as I could. Like, I was really trying to see it because it was too hard for me to question their authority. Questioning their decision would mean questioning everything. At the time, I couldn't do that. So I really tried to understand, even though I couldn't. It was so hard to understand. You know, because in my head, I was like, how is separating me from everybody that I love and know going to help me right now? I saw it as if anything, that's just going to push me into the arms of this so-called worldly guy that I'm supposed to be avoiding anyway. So, I couldn't understand it, but um, I tried. And it was really, really hard. So after I left the hall, drove to where my mom was working and told her the results, and she was like, "What? No, how? How can this happen? And, you were so sure that that wasn't going to happen. How could this happen?" And I was like, "I don't know." I just said, "I don't know." You know. So she was upset. She was like, "This is ridiculous. I'm gonna have to talk with them." And she was like, "This doesn't make sense." Her maternal instincts were on high, right? So, and that's one thing I can credit both my parents for. They might be brainwashed. They might be, unable to think clearly about a lot of things, but they do love their kids, and they would never, no matter who told them. I don't think they can justify shunning their kids, and I think that that's a really good thing, and I credit my parents for that. But it's unfortunate that they can't open their mind in other areas. But I do really credit them for that, and appreciate that there's really nothing I can do to make them stop loving me. Their love really is unconditional, which with most witnesses, unfortunately, that's not the case. Their parents' love for them is conditional. So anyway, um, yeah, I was disfellowshipped. It was kind of shocking. I didn't expect it to happen, and there was quite. Oh yeah, another thing they told me was not to have any, big parties with me and all of my witness friends before the announcement, because, you know, if I planned any, gatherings or hangouts before the announcement, well, those people would then feel, awkward once it was announced. So don't do anything like that, they told me. So technically, right when they made that decision, I was cut off from my friends. At that point, they told me I should start telling people I was close to what was going to happen, and that I shouldn't hang out with anyone until once the announcement was made, then they would know, but I shouldn't be very involved with them before the announcement was made. So I couldn't even really just, um, you know, just be with my friends one last time without feeling like I was feeling guilty, you know. But there were definitely some close friends that I wanted them to know, because I wanted them to know why, because I didn't want everyone to start gossiping about the reasons and saying completely ridiculous things, like, because people can make up a lot of stuff. Usually when it comes to young people getting disfellowshipped, it has to do with sex. Like, I would say 99% of the time. That's just a guess. I could be totally wrong. But I would assume, based on my experience and quite a few other people's that I know, that it's most of the time to do with sex. And I just wanted people to see the reasons. It wasn't like was so. I didn't feel like anything I did was that terrible per se. It wasn't like I went out and just slept with a bunch of guys, or whatever. Or it wasn't like, I was doing, drugs, drinking all the time, or smoking, or anything like that. And I wanted people to know the real reason before the rumor started spreading. So there were like, Actually, there was just the one friend that I told her, one friend where I told her the real reason we got together, and she was like, well, you're gonna come back, and I was trying to see this as a good thing. So I wasn't telling people, I feel like I've been mishandled. I wasn't trying to start anything like that. I was telling them like it was a good thing. I was like, yeah, it's gonna be just me and Jehovah for a while. Crazy me. But that's what I did. And they were like, well, you're gonna come back and you're gonna be so much stronger in the truth, and it's gonna be a good thing, and we love you, her and her husband. And then there was another friend that I didn't tell her only because she was going to be the hardest person to not have as a friend. Because me and her were very, very close. Um, and I was like, oh, I can't. I just couldn't tell her. It was too hard. And I knew she would figure it out because um, because she knew I was talking to a guy online. Um, but she, well, she knew he was studying. So she thought, okay, it's online, it's harmless. And she didn't rat me out, which I really credit her for. She didn't rat me out. So I knew that once the announcement was made, she'd figure it out, the reason. So I couldn't tell her. I just couldn't tell her. It was too hard. So, anyway, the announcement was made. Not right away. It was dragged out, which was even more annoying because I couldn't do anything. I was like in limbo. Like I was in the hall and people would talk to me and I felt so weird because it was like, you know, soon they're going to find out I'm disfellowshipped and what are they going to think of me? So I didn't want to be putting on this, big show like I was so spiritual and like perfect. Like I didn't want to be like overzealous, but I also didn't want to appear like a bad person. So I still tried to like, it was like this weird experience of trying to like still socialize with them, but at the same time I still had to withdraw. I couldn't be too close, and I felt like the elders were watching me, and it was just so awkward. And it took a while because right after they made their decision, there was like a CO's visit, and then there was, it was just weird. Or no, there was an assembly, and then I was announced. Oh my goodness, that's right. I think I was announced at the CO's visit. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's why. The hall was packed. Okay, so for those of you who aren't witnesses, um, the CO, he's the circuit overseer. He goes around the congregations within that circuit, makes sure, basically, now that I'm out and I can see what it's all about, he's basically just like a manager, making sure that, corporate policies are being applied properly and that the money is all as it should be within each congregation. But at the time, we're thinking he's coming around to give us spiritual upliftment. And to a degree, he's there to uplift the congregants to go out in service. He's like promoting service big time. Go out in the ministry, convert, 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 have Bible studies, right? That's what they're really there for. So whenever he's there, of course, even witnesses who don't go to all the meetings, who aren't perfectly active, they all go. Everyone's there. It's packed. Because they're hoping to get some spiritual upliftment because they're so depressed and down. Like honestly, I would say 90% of the witnesses are just like so burnt out, so depressed. So you see them all coming when he's there, and it's like they're probably just hoping like, oh, I hope he says something that really keeps my motivation high, all year until Armageddon, right? So when they announced it, um, it was a terrible day. So basically, I got to the meeting. I sat there with my family, and the elder head honcho of my judicial committee went up there and he said, Megan Genge is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It is so awkward how it is done. Like, it is honestly the most humiliating thing. I mean, there's really no way to do it in a non-humiliating way if you're making an announcement. But it is so weird because, you know, whichever brother is up there making the general announcements, he's like going on with whatever announcements, and then he's like, and now brother so and so has an announcement he has to make, and then the general announcer guy steps back, and then this other guy is walking up to the front, and everybody knows now, okay, he's either going to say somebody's reproved or somebody's disfellowshipped or dissociated, right? So everyone is just like all ears, just watching him go up to the stage, can't wait to see what he's going to say. And he goes to the stage and says, Megan Genge is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And he walks off. And then there's like this silence. And then the other guy comes back to the platform and just continues on with the announcements. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there, like sinking in my chair, trying not to let everyone know and see that I'm like sobbing, trying to do it quietly. And, you know, I'm trying not to look around immediately, but I happen to see some people's reactions because it's unavoidable. And yeah, there's people there that were like, oh, Megan, was that really? You know, and then there's like people who are like smug and happy about it because they just feel better about themselves or something. Oh man, it was so humiliating. Now I'm not trying to say like the witnesses aren't all heartless, cold, evil people. You know, they're not gonna like immediately think like, I mean, I would like to think that most of them aren't gonna be like, oh, you know, what an evil sinner, and look upon that person like they're just the dirt of all. But that's how you're treated. Whether or not this is what they're thinking, they no longer even will acknowledge you anymore. Like they might like see you and then like look away as if you're invisible. Like it's really weird. And I would like to think that most of them, because whenever I heard about people getting disfellowshipped, like whenever the elder did his thing and, you know, so and so is no longer a Jehovah's Witness, um, you never knew based on the announcement whether this person disassociated themselves or were disfellowshipped. If they were in the hall when it was announced, you assumed that they were probably disfellowshipped because they were there, you know, in the back. But if they were not there, you kind of assumed that they probably disassociated themselves, removed themselves from the congregation, you know. So I had to be there, even though it was really hard to be there because I didn't want people to think I did this myself. And yeah. And whenever I used to hear about it, I never used to think of these people as, oh, they're bad, like, or, oh, like, what a terrible person. There was a few people that I heard of getting disfellowshipped. And most of the time, there was no gossip that went around most of the time about what they did. If it was like a scandalous thing, and sometimes you knew what they did. But most of the time it was speculation. If there was gossip, it was just like, you didn't know for sure. It was speculation. No, this is what they did or that's what they did. It was like, you might hear 10 different things and just not be able to know for sure. But I just would look at these people, because it was usually young people, you know, and I felt like they were very brave people. That's how I looked at them. When I hear the announcement, I was like, wow, well, what a brave person, because, you know, he went and he confessed. But I also used to not be able to reconcile in my head how these people could be unrepentant, because that when you think of a person being unrepentant, you think of somebody who is just smug about what they did, and, you know, maybe they were forced to go to the elders because they got caught or something, and they were just really like, well, I don't feel like it was wrong. So when you think of the word unrepentant, you associate that with a person who just is really smug, basically. And a lot of the times I didn't really get how they could be that way, because they were there at the meeting for the announcement, and I thought to myself, like, it seems like they're repentant because they're here. I mean, if they were, unrepentant, they wouldn't be here, and I never used to be able to reconcile that. But it's basically not about unrepentance. It's about what the elders think. It's about how they judge you. And they don't use feelings. They don't ask, what you felt. So how can they really judge if you're repentant or not, if they're not really asking you why you did something, or what you were thinking at the time? Because they can't judge what your state of mind was, and therefore they can't really judge whether you're repentant. I mean, that's how I see it. But had I gone to like a mental health professional and was talking about the things I was going through, of course I would have never done that, because it would have been like, I would have been scared to be honest about whether I was a witness. It would have all, led back to that, and I would have been like, oh, I don't want to give Jehovah a bad name, right? So I would have never done that. But just hypothetically, had I done that, I have a very good feeling that a mental health professional would have been able to pick up on the kind of guy that I was dating. They would have asked a little bit more questions about him as a person. They would have been able to detect what I was going through. And they would have told me, for your own sanity, you should probably break up with this guy. He's manipulative. And I would have been like, ding, oh, really? Like, so I'm not crazy by having these thoughts. Like, he really is, right? But of course, that's not the kind of help you get when you go to the elders. It's just about, this is what you did, this is what's going to happen. So of course they think they're doing the right thing, but it's coming from the top down. They're doing what they're told to do in their little elders manual, their secret handbook. And it's about control. It's about, you didn't listen to these many rules and restrictions, so we're going to cut you off before you have a chance to influence anybody else. We need to keep people a certain way so that they keep this appearance like we're such a clean organization. When you get out and find out all the things about this organization, wow, are you ever shocked to see how dirty they really are. But anyway, so I think I've been talking for quite some time again, which I don't mean to make these videos so long. I guess I just have a lot to say. So I apologize if it's dragging on. But I think I'm going to conclude. There's so many topics, there's so many things I want to talk about, and I plan to get to it. I have a lot of personal stories. The next video, I think I'm going to just talk about what it was like being disfellowshipped, how long I was disfellowshipped, because I actually got reinstated before I eventually left. So I'm going to kind of try to explain to you that process. And yeah, so I guess that's it for now. There's a lot of videos I want to talk about. I'd love to talk about sexual repression within young people. I'd love to talk about a lot of the ridiculous doctrines that, now that I am out, I can look at and think like, wow, how did I believe these things? It is really hard for you to see things clearly when you're inside, constantly being indoctrinated, going to all the meetings, doing everything you're supposed to do, it is really hard for you to see things from a different point of view. So I'd just like to talk about a lot of different things, but I think I'll just also talk about more of my own personal stories. A lot of people will say that to leave the witnesses, you have to have, as Raymond Franz put it, a crisis of conscience. And that's true. I mean, a lot of people have different things that happen to them that just don't sit well with them. And that eventually kind of spurs them into leaving. And for me, I actually had a lot of different experiences in my life that that I think planted seeds of doubt. And it may not have got me to leave right away, but I think that they were, you know, just building blocks up to the point where I finally just broke, you know. And I'll explain some of those stories, perhaps. Some of them are really personal, and I might not explain all the details, but yeah, so my ultimate crisis of conscience, I think, was getting disfellowshipped. That was really the thing that changed my faith, you know. Um, so thank you, elders. Thank you. As hard as it was to be disfellowshipped, if I didn't get disfellowshipped, I probably would still be a witness today. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. So anyway, that's all for now, and I will make more videos maybe next week. I might make another one. I don't want to be on here too much because I got lots of stuff I gotta try to do. I'm a busy person and I don't want to just waste too much time, but I do want to make more videos. So I'll talk to you all later, and thank you for watching.